What did you do then?
Went through the house, kind of cleaned it up. It's called the right-hand rule. You go from room to room. Picked everything up. I think I took Mr. Otero's watch. I guess I took a radio. I forgot about that, but apparently I took a radio.
Why did you take these things?
I don't know. I have no idea. Just
what happened then?
In 1974, a man began leaving fear in the quiet neighborhoods of Wichita, Kansas. He committed a series of crimes that confused investigators for decades. He left clues, letters, a name that would become infamous. BTK, short for bind, torture, kill. But this story isn't just about a criminal. It's about what he left behind. This is a true story, told from the unique and deeply personal point of view of his daughter. I still remember the exact moment my whole world shattered. It was 12:24 p.m. when my phone rang. It was the FBI, and those words, they will haunt me forever. Miss Rawson, your father has been arrested. He's the BTK killer. I laughed. I thought it was a mistake. Some sick joke. My dad? Dennis Rader? The man behind Kansas's most horrific murders? No way. That just couldn't be true. But it wasn't a mistake. That call marked the end of my innocence. For as long as I can remember, my father was the kind of man you thought you could trust without question. A man who seemed ordinary on the surface. But to me, he was so much more. He was the dad who showed up for every school play. The man who fixed the broken lawnmower on a Saturday afternoon. The one who made terrible jokes that somehow made us laugh. He was a church leader, respected in our tight-knit community in Kansas. He wore the face of a devoted family man and a pillar of the neighborhood. Of course, there were strange things, little moments that didn't make sense at the time. But looking back now, they feel like cracks in a perfect facade. Sometimes he would disappear without explanation, just gone for hours or even a whole day. When I asked, he'd say he was running errands or had to work late. I believed him because who would suspect their own father? He locked his office at home with a double lock. Not just a simple door lock, but something more serious. When I asked why, he said it was to keep important documents safe. That made sense, especially since he worked in security. One day, I stumbled upon a photo in an old file tucked away in that locked office. It was disturbing, a woman bound and tied up, eyes wide with fear. My heart stopped. When I confronted him, he didn't get angry or defensive. Instead, he calmly said it was part of a campaign against depravity. I had no reason to doubt him then. I believed him. I always believed him. Because how could you suspect your own father? We want to see the people we love as good. We want to hold on to the idea that they would never hurt anyone, especially not their family. So, we ignore the signs. We make excuses. We push down our doubts and fears. But those little things, they were there, like whispers of a darker reality that I wasn't ready to face. There were nights when I heard noises from his office, sometimes low, strange sounds, almost like whispers or movement. I told myself it was just the house settling. There were moments when his eyes looked colder than usual, when he seemed distant, distracted, or even angry for no reason. I thought it was stress from work or personal problems. He kept secrets, so many secrets, but I was blind to them, and that blindness is what allowed him to hide in plain sight for so long. I think about how many times I could have asked more questions, how many times I might have seen the truth if I had just looked harder. But the hardest truth of all is that love can sometimes be the most blinding thing of all. Now, let's tell about the arrest. That day, February 25th, 2005, started like any other, but it ended with my entire world collapsing. I remember waking up to the sound of voices outside, heavy boots on the porch, the sudden roar of cameras flashing like lightning bolts in the quiet neighborhood. The FBI agents were there, in my parents' home. They didn't waste a second. They searched every inch of the house, leaving no stone unturned. Their faces were serious, focused. The media arrived moments later, flooding the streets with flashing lights and questions. Reporters shouted for answers. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. Our peaceful community was suddenly the center of a nightmare. I was locked away in the bathroom, tears streaming down my face, my body shaking. But I was somewhere else, my head pressed against my knees, my mind racing to understand what was happening. The man I had called Dad, the man I trusted, had been arrested. He was Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, the man who had terrorized Kansas for over 30 years. He was a monster who enjoyed playing with the police, sending them letters filled with twisted jokes and mocking clues. For 3 decades, he had slipped in and out of houses like a ghost, targeting innocent families, destroying lives with brutal precision. He wasn't just a killer. Behind the mask of a loving father, a church leader, a friendly neighbor, and behind it all, he hid in plain sight. Every smile, every hug, every quiet moment now felt like a lie. It was impossible to reconcile the image of the man I knew with the horror of what he had done. Forced to face the truth, no matter how unbearable it was. In that moment, I felt completely shattered, as if the ground beneath me had given way. How could the man who held my hand when I was scared, who kissed my forehead goodnight, be the same person who committed those atrocities? Watched and judged by a world that couldn't understand what I was going through. Cameras outside the house, reporters camped in front of our door, neighbors gawking and whispering behind my back. The pain was overwhelming. Not just the shock, but the betrayal. I wasn't just losing my father. I was losing the foundation of my entire life. As the agents searched the house, collecting evidence, I heard whispered conversations about the crimes. Details that once seemed like distant headlines were suddenly horrifyingly close. My childhood memories were tainted by a dark shadow. I wanted to scream, to run away, to erase the nightmare. But I was trapped in the eye of the storm. The media frenzy made it worse. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. The arrest was not just a legal event. It was a personal apocalypse. It marked the brutal end of any innocence I had left. And yet, amidst that devastation, I knew something had to change. I had to find a way to survive, to find strength in the wreckage. Because even though my father was a monster, I was still his daughter, and I had to live. 4 years, he played the role of the loving father, the man who came home every evening, smiled at us, and tucked me into bed. The man who led church services, volunteered in the community, and was the friendly neighbor everyone trusted. But behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. The man who strangled women in isolated houses, leaving a trail of terror across Kansas for decades. He had hiding places, secret compartments where he stored memories of his crimes, trophies that no one should ever keep. He even drew pictures cold, precise sketches of his victims and the horrors he inflicted, all kept in a hidden notebook, a dark diary of evil that only he knew about. When I first read the reports, when I saw the photos, my world shattered again. The official files laid bare the horror in brutal detail, the evidence, the scenes of crime, the faces of victims I would never forget. It was overwhelming, but the hardest part wasn't the shock of what he did. It was the betrayal, the crushing, Realization that the monster everyone hunted had been sleeping in my living room. That the man who kissed me goodnight was the same man who lived a secret life of violence and cruelty. It felt like my entire reality was a lie. I was forced to rebuild myself while carrying a truth no one ever wants to face. How do you come to terms with the fact that your father is a serial killer? How do you process the fact that the person you loved most was capable of such darkness? The answer is, you don't, at least not all at once. It takes time, patience, and a deep, painful journey into acceptance. I had to separate the father I knew from the monster he really was. I had to find a way to forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner. And I had to choose to live my own life, free from the shadow he cast. This revelation changed everything. It tore apart my family, my identity, and my sense of safety. But it also gave me something unexpected: strength. Because facing the darkest truth gave me the power to rise, to reclaim my story, to speak out for the victims and for anyone who has ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. The man who hid in plain sight taught me a painful but important lesson: that evil can wear the face of normalcy, and that the only way to fight it is to never stop seeking the truth. But the truth is, I was just a child. No child can be expected to see the darkness hiding behind a father's smile. I struggled with guilt every day. It was like an invisible chain that held me down, making it hard to breathe. Alongside guilt was fear, a deep, nagging fear that I might be like him, that his darkness might run through my veins, that I might carry the same capacity for evil. That fear made me question who I was at my core. I hated that I shared his blood. I was ashamed of my family name. I wanted to disappear, to run far away from the shadow that hung over my life. But slowly, painfully, I began to understand something crucial: that I am not my father, that my choices, my actions, and my values are mine alone, and that loving someone doesn't mean you have to accept everything about them. I realized I could both love my father and condemn what he did. This paradox was hard to live with, but accepting it was the first step toward healing. Healing was never going to be easy. I turned to therapy. I found people who could listen without judgment, people who helped me unravel the tangled mess of emotions inside me. I started writing. Writing became my outlet, my way to make sense of the chaos. At first, I wrote for myself. Then, slowly, I began to share my story with others. Because silence is what feeds monsters. When we keep pain hidden, when we pretend things didn't happen, the darkness grows stronger. Speaking out was terrifying. Opening up about the truth risked judgment, misunderstanding, even rejection. But it was also liberating. It gave me control. It allowed me to take back my voice from the shadow of my father's crimes. Sharing my story became a mission, a way to honor the victims, a way to warn others that evil can hide anywhere, even in the people we love most, and a way to connect with others who had been betrayed, hurt, or broken by those they trusted. The path of healing is not linear. There are good days and bad days. Days when the past feels like a heavy chain around my neck, and days when I feel free to breathe again. I have learned to be patient with myself, to accept that some wounds take time to close, to recognize that scars don't disappear. They become a part of our story, our strength. One of the hardest parts of this journey has been confronting my own identity. Who am I if not my father's daughter? How do I build a life when the world knows my family's darkest secret? I had to redefine myself. My father destroyed lives. He shattered mine. This is a fact I cannot escape, a reality that has shaped every corner of my existence. Yet, despite the immense weight of this truth, I refuse to allow him to have the final say over my life or my identity. I am Kerri Rawson, the daughter of a serial killer, but I am also a mother, a wife, and above all, a survivor. These roles define me more than any darkness cast by my father's actions. The story I carry is heavy, filled with pain, betrayal, and confusion. But it is not the sum total of who I am. It is a story I choose to tell, not only for myself but for the countless victims whose voices were silenced, for the children living in the shadows of secrets, and for every person who has ever faced the unbearable truth of betrayal within their own family. Living with the knowledge of what my father did has been an almost unbearable burden. It feels like carrying an invisible weight in my chest, pressing down relentlessly, shaping every thought and emotion. But as difficult as it has been, I have come to understand that his crimes, horrific and unfathomable as they are, do not erase the goodness and strength I have fought to build in my own life. I refuse to be defined by the sins of a man who wore a mask of normalcy, hiding his monstrous nature behind the facade of a loving father, a community leader, and a neighbor. My identity is not a reflection of his darkness, but the result of my own choices, resilience, and will to survive. To the victims and their families, I want to say this with the deepest sincerity and humility. I am truly sorry. I cannot begin to comprehend the depth of your pain or the permanent void left by the loss of someone you loved. The horror my father inflicted extends far beyond what words can capture. And while I cannot change the past or undo the damage, I carry immense respect for your strength and your courage in the face of unimaginable tragedy. You deserve justice and peace, and although the scars remain, your memories will not be forgotten. I promise to honor your experiences by continuing to speak the truth, to fight for awareness, and to ensure that the darkness that once hid in plain sight is exposed and confronted. It is because of your courage that I find the strength to continue sharing this story. One of the cruelest realities I have come to face is how often children live in the shadows of horrifying secrets, forced to love someone capable of great evil. These children grow up with silent pain, their suffering unseen and unheard by the world around them. I share my story not only for myself but for those children, to let them know that they are not alone and that there's a path forward, even when surrounded by darkness. It is my hope that my experience will serve as a warning, a call to action, and a source of solace for those who find themselves in similar situations. What must change if we want to prevent tragedies like this from happening again is awareness and education. We must learn to pay attention not only to the glaring signs of danger, but also to the subtle, whispered warnings that are so often dismissed or ignored. Evil does not always make itself obvious. It can quietly wear a mask of normalcy, blending seamlessly into everyday life, hidden behind a smile, a handshake, or a routine. Communities must cultivate a balance of vigilance and compassion, ensuring that safe spaces exist where people can speak openly without fear of shame or reprisal. Education about mental health, abuse, violence, and the importance of communication must be integrated into our schools, workplaces, and social fabric, because silence and ignorance only allow monsters to thrive in the dark. Relearning to trust after such a profound betrayal has been one of the most difficult and transformative lessons in my journey. Trust, once shattered, is not easily rebuilt, yet it is essential for healing, connection, and growth. It requires patience, empathy, and the willingness to be vulnerable again. For anyone navigating trauma or betrayal, I encourage you to seek support. Find those who will listen without judgment, and grant yourself the grace to heal in your own time. There is no shame in needing help. and no weakness in admitting that the road to recovery is complex and nonlinear. Survival, I have learned, is about more than simply enduring or existing in the aftermath of tragedy. It is about growing stronger through the pain and making conscious choices to reclaim your story and your future. Resilience is not an innate gift, but a skill forged through struggle, reflection, and courage. Each day brings new opportunities to find hope, to reclaim control, and to rebuild what was lost. This strength is what carries me forward when the weight of memories feels overwhelming and the darkness threatens to consume. My story is not mine alone. It is a call to action for families who may be hiding painful secrets, for communities tempted to look away, and for individuals who feel powerless in the face of overwhelming darkness. I implore you to speak up, to reach out, and to ask difficult questions even when it feels uncomfortable or frightening. Do not accept silence when it is used to protect harm. Only truth has the power to heal wounds, save lives, and bring justice. It is through transparency, courage, and collective vigilance that we can hope to build a safer, more compassionate world. Even in the bleakest moments, hope can and must break through. Hope for healing that stitches broken hearts, for justice that honors the lost, and for a future where fear no longer dictates our lives. I hold onto this hope for myself, for my family, and for all those affected by violence. I share my journey in the hope that it encourages others to find their voices, to confront their pain, and to join the fight against the shadows that threaten to consume us all. My journey of healing is ongoing. I continue to learn, to grow, and to confront the challenges that come with carrying such a painful legacy. Yet, I will never stop speaking, not just for myself, but for those who can no longer speak for themselves. No matter how deep the wounds, there is always light to be found, and I am committed to seeking that light until it shines for all of us. Ultimately, this story is about more than tragedy. It is about the power of the human spirit to survive, to heal, and to transform pain into purpose. It is about the importance of truth, empathy, and courage in the face of darkness. And it is about the unwavering belief that no matter how heavy the burden, we have the strength within us to rise, to rebuild, and to create a future where hope prevails.